Hey Lifehouse, it's Dale here again. Thank you so much for just hopping on here and listening. I hope that you guys have really enjoyed some of these Romans nuggets and that you've just felt closer to God, closer to His truths, and that it's really just impacted you in some way. So yesterday, Paul shared about the fact that we cannot be separated from God. That because of what Jesus came and did, He got involved in our suffering, that now we are sons and daughters, and that cannot change. And that's such a beautiful truth. Can't lose our salvation, and we can't do anything to keep it or lose it. We're just His, and it's the most beautiful truth. But now I love how Romans is taking us from one truth to the next, just in awesome steps. And the next thing that I want to share, which is Romans 9, verse 1 to 5, starts to express Paul's anguish over Israel, what he was feeling in his heart because Israel wasn't walking in the promises. They weren't choosing God back. And that just takes us from understanding we'll never be separated. God has chosen us, but then there is a next step where we got to understand that we choose God as well. We choose to walk into His promises. It's why He's given us free will to love. If we were forced to love and forced to choose Him, He wouldn't be the compassionate Father He is. But He gives us the freedom to choose Him, to love Him, to walk in His promises. And even though there may be sufferings, we still get to choose this thing. So I want to read Romans 9, verse 1 to 5. And I love that when I read from the NIV, and then I'm going to read from the Passion Translation right now. But in Romans 9, the title in the NIV is Paul's Anguish over Israel. But then in the Passion Translation, the heading is Paul's love for the Jewish people. And I love that that's almost the same thing. Is that when we're feeling an anguish in our heart towards someone because of what they're walking in, it's because there's a deep love for that person. And I know some of you may have felt that. I know I felt that with a couple of friends of mine where they've chosen to just walk in the ways of the world. They've chosen to step away from God, even though God has never stepped away from them, but to step away from God. And I remember those moments of just in my heart feeling such sorrow towards them, but sorrow for them because I know that they're not walking in the joy that God has for them. And I remember just praying for those. And actually when I saw one or two of those friends actually turn their lives around and just give their lives to God, I can't explain the joy it gave me. I can't explain just the hope, the faith, the heart of the Father that I felt. So I'm going to read what Paul says about Israel, and here you go. O Israel, my Jewish family, I feel such a great sorrow and heartache for you that never leaves me. God knows these deep feelings within me as I long for you to come to the faith in the Anointed One. My conscience will not let me speak anything but the truth, for my grief is so intense that I wish that I would be accursed, cut off from the Messiah, if it would mean that you, my people, would come to faith in Him. You are Israelites, my fellow citizens, and God's chosen people. To you belong God's glorious presence, the covenants, the Torah, the temple with its required sacrifices, and the promises of God. We trace our beginnings back to the patriarchs, and through their bloodline is the genealogy of the Messiah, who is God over everything. May He be praised through endless ages. Amen. So as you can see, Paul's obviously feeling quite a lot about this, and rightly so. I know some people have prayed this prayer, or you've heard this prayer before, where we come before the Father in a moment of really feeling in love with Him and just understanding what's going on in the world. And we say, Lord, break my heart for what breaks yours. And I know that this is what's happening with Paul. And I believe the answer to that prayer is that God says, okay, well, I'm going to draw you closer to my heart. It's always through intimacy, always through relationship with Him that we start to feel what He's feeling. Because when we are in communion with Him, when we sit with Him, we begin to know more of what He's doing. So God's heart is to see His children live in the fullness of the joy that He has placed inside of us. The fullness of the joy that He has placed inside of His promises. But He's let the choice up to us. He's let the choice for us to walk in that up to us. And as we can see that Israel did not choose that. Israel, even though there were so many promises performed, God constantly provided for them. He chose them as His people, yet they didn't choose Him back. And often the crazy thing is that we always need God, but we don't often want Him. But God doesn't need us, but He really wants us. Like a father who just wants to see his children grow. He just wants to see his children choose and live in the fullness that He's created for them. but he also wants to use us. I know that God finds so much joy in using us to perform things, using us to bring his hands and his feet and his heart to the earth, that we get to partner with him through this incredible thing called life. So we have a choice to live in the promises of God, or we have the choice to not live in the promises of God like Israel had chosen. And that is our free will. We get to choose him. But just remember that he has chosen us. There are plans and purposes that he has placed in our lives that he wants us to walk in. But even though there may be suffering, even though there may be trials, those promises are still there. And he will fulfill what he has spoken from the beginning. But he does need our hand in it. He does need our partnership in it. He needs us to agree with him about the goodness of his nature. So obviously Paul felt this in his heart. He felt the deep longings of the Father to see a nation grab hold of what it's called to do. And I believe that God has that for each and every one of us. So as you go throughout your day, just remember that God has a massive call on your life. But it starts by just being a son, just being a daughter, understanding that you are chosen. There's nothing that can separate you from the Father. No guilt, no shame, no condemnation, no sin. Nothing can separate you. So choose him back. That's your challenge for today. Choose him back no matter what it looks like, no matter what it feels like. Take that one step forward. Don't be like Israel. Choose him back. He won't disappoint you. Love you, bless you, and I just pray that the Father's heart will flood over you just as it did over Paul. That you would understand his longings for you, for your life, for this country, for your family. And that you'll begin to walk in the beautiful pleasures of who he is.